Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Seek a Psychology. Today we're going to be looking specifically at goal setting, and we're going to be looking at goal setting particularly for strength goals. A lot of the people who watch this channel, so a lot of you guys and girls out there are very, very interested in weightlifting, powerlifting. You might be interested in strength sports through things like CrossFit or strength and conditioning for the sport you do. Obviously, we're starting off a new year soon, and it's going to be important for you to be kind of setting different goals. You'll probably have multiple different goals, hopefully well laid out for your new year of training or the next training cycle you're getting into. Today, I'm going to look at specifically just strength training, right? There's some aspects to strength training that make it very, very malleable and applicable to good goal setting. There's also a few bits of nuance that you need to kind of take into account when you are setting goals for strength outcomes, right? So let's just cover the groundwork first. We did a video on strength training for physique back, I think, early June, and I'll put a link to that down below. Hopefully there might be a box up here somewhere with a link, but we haven't got that to work yet. So go and watch that video if you're interested in that, kind of changing of body composition, changing of body mass. Today, when we're looking at goal setting, we'll very much look at it through the same lens, right? So SMART goal setting, SMART's obviously an acronym. That's specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, relevant and timely goals, right? So they're the kind of five borders within which you'll set your goals. We're going to kind of use those as our 5 bullet points to which we'll check our goals off against. And then what I'm going to talk about as well is like what makes up a long-term, a medium-term and a short-term goal, why you might want more of one of those than you will of the others, and why you'll want a kind of a full remit of goals rather than just having one thing set out there in the future.
You've got to come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.
Right, so let's start off, right? If we're looking at strength training today, we'll just say squatting, deadlifting and pressing. We can say bench pressing or we can say strict pressing, whichever one you want. The kind of outlines are going to be very, very similar, right? So firstly, we need to be specific. So in the physique video, we talked a lot about people just want to get in better shape. I think people are much better at being specific with their goal setting when it comes to strength training, right? Because they'll be able to very simply pick a movement, whether that's back squat, high bar, low bar, whether that's deadlift, sumo deadlift, bench press, whatever it is. The kind of specificity of the goal is quite easy to do, and obviously due to the very objective nature of strength training, like we have a number we want to hit, we have a number of sets we might want to hit it for, we might have a total volume of a training session we might want to hit it for, so we might want 5x5, we might want a certain volume load, 5x5 at 140 kilos, whatever that is. So that is one area where strength training is very, very applicable to bring across into kind of SMART goal setting. So it's very easy to be specific. And what I would say is if you're sitting down now and you have a few days over your kind of holiday break and you're thinking, okay, I want to set some goals, I want to put something down on paper, and you take out your A4 pad, you start writing things out, be uber specific. Be specific to the realm of almost neuroticism. So I want a back squat that is this weight, that might look a certain way. I want it within a certain amount of time, and just keep hashing out points. Your first sheet when you're writing should just look like somebody who was writing out a dream, right? There should be all different things as you're kind of remembering them and thinking of them, and then as you get more ideas and more in depth, just throw it all down on a sheet of paper. This can all be kind of picked through and you can derive out your goals from it later, but very, very early doors, you just want a sheet of paper and just start writing things on it. 200 kilo back squat, 100 kilo body weight, double body weight deadlift, whatever it is, just start writing these things out. Okay, the next thing is measurable. Obviously, this is ideal for strength training. Almost everything we do in strength training is measurable, right? So a lot of the time we're looking at the weight on the bar. Usually we're counting reps. We're always counting sets. When you're looking at the measurable or measurability of a certain goal, we do have issues where something might be quite qualitative. An issue that will come up when we talk about the squat later on is is we'll often want the squat to look a certain way and I'll want to hit a PB in it, right? And obviously sometimes those things are very much concurrent. So once I get better technique and the squat starts to look better, I will also be able to lift more weights. But then oftentimes those paths are very, very divergent, where somebody's used to squatting heavy weights in a bad way, and it will take quite an amount of training for them to develop possibly different areas of musculature, possibly develop different areas of skill and neuromuscular control. And so those two goals may not be very convergent. One might significantly pull you away from the other for a certain amount of time. So when we are looking at something that's measurable, it's important when you're hashing out all those goals on the first sheet of paper that you just start putting these things in. If you want something to look a certain way, if you want it to be with knee sleeves or without knee sleeves, do you want to be able to deadlift with straps or without straps? Do you want to be able to do it on any day of the week? So a lot of time people will have a squat number, a deadlift number, a power clean number that they want to be able to do every day of the week. No matter how bad they're feeling, they want to be this strong. And that's particularly for our athletes and people involved in kind of more specific sports rather than just in strength training. It's very important for you to have that prolonged strength, or that strength that will last and be available to you all the way out throughout the season. Okay, so the next thing is attainable. Attainable is a funny one in SMART goal setting. Attainable, they used to have the R as being realistic, and now the R is relevant. These are all kind of just words people will play around with depending on what side of the Atlantic you're on. Your SMART goal setting might have different words after the A and the R, right? But we're going to say attainable for today. Myself and Gerf always talk very, very frankly about kind of what's realistic. We get people asking us all the time, what do you think is a good goal for me to set? I have X, Y, and Z numbers. I'm whatever age. I've been training for whatever amount of time. Do you think I can do A, B, and C numbers? It's very, very difficult to say that to you. It's very, very difficult to tell someone they're not going to hit something or they are going to hit something. What I will say is the world is your oyster in terms of strength training. What I will be very, very cognizant of all the time is that as you're setting goals relevant to yourself. Now, if you're top 5 of the people in your weight class in your country, you can certainly start looking at what those other people are doing within your weight class. You can start seeing what the national record might be. Who's the national champion last year? What did he or she hit? How am I going to be able to stack up against that? If you're in the top 5 people or the top 10 people, and that's something that's actually attainable to you. For most of us, though, when we're setting strength goals, we really want to be looking introspectively. We want to see, okay, what was I able to achieve last year? Will my training will I have the same resources available to me this year? Will I have some other resources available to me this year that will make me better able to train for strength? Will I have more time to train? Will I have more time to recover? Is my workload outside of training increasing? Will I have more stress or less stress? So all these things have to be taken into account when you talk about, is this goal going to be attainable? We've all set lofty goals. Lots of us haven't achieved them. There's nothing wrong with setting lofty goals. But there's nothing worse than having a full list of goals and achieving or attaining none of them. So do be quite realistic. If it's something where you don't know if something is possible or not, put it in a YouTube comment and ask someone. Reach out to a coach. Reach out to that other guy or girl who's in your weight class and ask them how long it took them to get to a certain level. Just be very, very realistic with yourself on one thing. I would say, obviously, there's a very, very high prevalence of people lying about what they use to get to certain results, particularly in strength training and high performance sport. Prevalence of PEDs is quite high, and if you're looking at someone saying, oh, that girl or that guy is same age as me, same weight as me, appears as though they're training the same amount of time as me and their total is double what mine is, could well be something else going on there, or you might just need to train stronger. So do be quite realistic. Don't be afraid to ruminate over the attainability of that goal for quite some time and just see, is it something that's actually going to be achievable for you? Right, so the next thing is realistic or relevant, right? And we'll probably call it relevant for this thing. We, as athletes, tend to have a higher ego than other groups of people. Now, obviously, the amount of ego someone has is very, very dependent on their own particular personality traits and their particular personality state they're currently in, right? So a lot of us might have ego in certain areas. We might have ego in the workplace. We might have ego in training or in competition, but we may not have it in our personal lives. However that is, when we look at how relevant something is to us, a lot of the time people do get caught up and they set goals that aren't really relevant to their kind of general path, where they're going with their life, the way other things are set up in their life. So someone might say, oh, I really want a 200 kilo back squat, right? 200 kilo back squat, very attainable for a large amount of people. But if you are currently 75 or 78 kilos, you're now squatting 140 kilos. You're very, very happy with the size of you of a human being, your body composition, and you're not really relevant to put on some weight. You're not really relevant to lose the six pack immediately. Not that that's necessary, but you're not necessarily happy to change your morphology to go after this 200 kilo or this 250 kilo back squat. How relevant is that goal to you? It's great to say it to yourself. It's great to say it to everyone else that, oh yeah, I'm going to squat 200 kilos or whatever it is. But unless that goal is very relevant to you as a person, to what you're trying to do, if you really like going out hiking at the weekends, but you're also telling everyone or telling yourself or setting out a stream of goals that says, I want to train 6 times a week, hiking at the weekends just isn't going to be possible. Like, you're not going to have very high quality training throughout the week and then be able to go and hike at the weekends or do whatever it is with your friends. In the same way where somebody is maybe setting a goal about hitting certain numbers for squatting, bench pressing and deadlifting, and they want to go out drinking every 2 weekends, 1 weekend every month even might actually be too much. You need to see, are these goals you're setting really relevant to where you are right now, to what you'll be doing for the next year, or at least what you'll be doing during the time period you've set that goal for. That brings us on nicely then to my last thing, and that's the T in SMART, and that's for timely. So everyone is suspect of it. We'll set a goal, we'll set it for whatever it is. I want to hit this number by the time I finish training. I want to achieve this team by the time I finish at my sport. Being very, very sharp and very, very pernickety about the dates you set your goals for is absolutely vital. Now, it may be that you set a goal for national championships next year, might be setting a goal for a certain competition the year after next. That's absolutely fine. You don't really have control over that date, and you will have to make sure you're quite malleable around that. But you need to put exact dates on things. You need to put exact timelines on things. You need to then stick to those dates and stick to those timelines. And if you don't achieve what you were going to achieve by the end of it, you need to pivot. You need to alter your course. You need to change something which will allow you to achieve that goal in the future, or else which will allow you to simply step away from it and understand you're not going to achieve it. This is one of the main places you have to kind of have that conversation with yourself in the mirror and put down an actual date on the piece of paper. To give you an example of this, last year I had a fractured leg. I had set a date that I was going to try and achieve a certain physical endeavor on it. I knew I wasn't going to continue training after this, so I just said, okay, things aren't perfect. I'm going to still try and go for it. I tried to go for it on that date. It didn't work out. And now here we are, a number of months later, in quite a good condition to start another training block to go towards it again. So I will say, this will make more of a difference to your goal setting and to actually achieving goals you want to achieve for yourself than almost anything else I've spoken about today. Okay, let's talk specifics. So squat, deadlift, bench press, strict press, whatever it is. There's inherent things that are associated with each of these strength movements that make them good for setting goals around, but that also you need to be very conscious that there are roadblocks in place for each of them. So the first thing we look at is a squat, right? Whether it be high bar squat or low bar squat, there is an issue when people look at their squat, right, and they're not happy with how the squat looks. So qualitatively, they're not really happy with the squat, but they also want to achieve that PB in the actual number itself. It's what I was talking about at the start of this squat. You might have somebody who high bar squats, but they're really hinged over. It's more of a good morning high bar, low bar squat. They want to fix that, and they want to hit bigger numbers in the squat. Now, those paths are not convergent. If you are hinging over a lot in your squat and you're really, really posteriorly dominant, you're not going to be able to hit PBs while also fixing that squat, because the fact that you're hinging over so much is probably due to the fact that you have terribly weak legs, or else your anterior chain, it may not be weak, but in comparison to your posterior chain, is not sufficient to have good upright squatting posture. In that case, if you're setting goals around your squat, maybe look at something like a high bar back squat and set a goal there, front squat, set a goal there, and then you can go back to your low bar competition style squat and you can get after it quite well. It's something I'm working with a client on right now, and it is something you really have to be cognizant of. If you have technique that is a certain weight, now there are certain technical flaws that, say if somebody is bending their arms as they're pulling a deadlift off the floor, you're going to be able to fix that technique and hit a new PB. But there are certain aspects, and particularly with the squat, when we're trying to fix certain things, trying to fix certain aspects of someone's technique, that might not necessarily put kilos on the bar straight away. Okay, the next issue we'll talk about with setting PB, or setting specific goals around our squat, and this isn't only for the squat, but it's particularly relevant here, is that people talk about all-time PBs and they don't talk about where they are now versus that all-time PB, right? So someone will say, for example, I want to hit a 10 kilo PB. That 10 kilo PB might bring them from 180 kilos to 190 kilos. The issue is that person may not be able to squat 180 kilos right now. They might not have trained for a significant period of time. They might have been training in a different modality for a long period. So their squat at the moment might be 160 kilos. Now, suddenly, a simple 10 kilo increase, something that equates to probably around 5% of an increase overall, is now 30 kilos of an increase. It's a massive increase to do 30 kilos over the course of a training cycle versus 10 kilos over the course of a training cycle. So you just need to be cognizant of where you are now, and that your squat PV isn't really what's important when you're planning and setting goals. Where you're currently at is very, very important when you're planning, when you're picking what program you're going to do, when you're selecting the weights you're going to do in that program. Right, the last thing that I'll talk about specifically with the squat is that people put a glass ceiling on their kind of progress, right? So we get it all the time. Someone will have been programming for themselves, or they might have been in a club where the program was done for them. They've been stuck at a squatting weight for a certain amount of time, and it seems to happen with the squat more so than any other lift. And they'll say, okay, we'll sell them a program, they'll get their PDF, and they'll say, 6 weeks in, you want me to do my old 1RM for reps. That's not possible. You need to be very, very loose with holding on to old 1RMs, right? You need to stop putting old 1RMs on a pedestal. If you want to see what old 1RMs look like for reps, if you want to see what old 1RMs look like for 3x8, you should be going and joining the Seek a Strength Facebook members group. It's available for anyone who buys a program. You will see literally hundreds of people there who hit old 1RMs for 3 sets of 8 reps a number of weeks into the program, right? These things are very, very possible, and people put this glass ceiling on themselves because due to either poor training technique, poor recovery techniques, poor programming overall, lack of direction with their training, lack of consistency with their training, they'll get stuck at certain numbers for a long, long, long time. And the longer you're stuck there, the more difficult it is to pry yourself out of that rut. So don't hold on to these things too much. Moving forward, with the deadlift, are there any roadblocks to us setting particular PBs or setting particular goals? There's kind of 2 main things. The first of those main things is that the deadlift is very, very fatiguing, and not only to the system, but neurologically, physiologically, biochemically, the deadlift really, really breaks us down, and it puts us in a not great place. We can't necessarily throw volume and throw frequency and throw load at a deadlift and expect it to just climb, because realistically we're probably going to get injured if we did something like a small off setup for a deadlift. There's no way you'll be able to handle that load. The next thing that brings us on from that is that the deadlift isn't necessarily the main pusher of a deadlift. And so when we talk about setting squat goals, we probably want to get somebody who will initially set a short-term goal of a higher rep squat that might be a 10RM or a 5RM PB. Then they might want a PB double or a PB triple, and then they might get a PB single at the end. That'll be a nice kind of schema to build us forward into a squat PB. with the deadlift, it doesn't necessarily work like that, or it doesn't work like that quite as well. Usually what we see the main driver of people's deadlift being is as their back squat increases, their deadlift will increase, and we can kind of throw volume and throw load and throw frequency at the back squat and force that to increase. But we can't do the same thing with the deadlift. So you just do need to be cognizant of that. The final thing then, talking about the press, talking about possible areas or issues that might come up with goal setting with the press, is that particularly if you're a weightlifter, doing a lot of pressing, whether that be bench pressing or strict pressing, can alter position slightly. Now, it can change things like range of motion, it can change neuromuscular control under certain ranges of motion, and those things can be issues. There's certainly a huge advantage to having a very strong strict press as a weightlifter. So there's certain advantages to even having a strong bench press as a weightlifter, but you do need to be cognizant that a lot of work in that specific area can change your sport specific work. So don't necessarily go setting a load of pressing goals without thinking about it or kind of ruminating on that for a while first. The last thing I will say about setting goals to do with pressing in particular, pressing is one of the main modalities of training that responds best to frequency, right? So typically when you get a powerlifter and they're going towards competition, as they come out of a prep phase, their frequency could go from twice a week to 3 times a week to 4 times a week. And that's something that typically wouldn't happen with something like squatting and pressing and rowing. But with the press movements in particular, they react very, very well to frequency. And so we might set a goal that's very achievable. So 1.5 times body weight bench press. To get to that goal very efficiently, we would be pressing 3 times a week or maybe 4 times a week, depending on the body weight you currently sit at. But that's going to take a huge amount of training volume and training load. So when you are sitting down and writing out that sheet of goals, just be cognizant of that. So I hope you found this video entertaining or hopefully useful in some way. It would be great if you could pop some goals down into the comments down below. If you have questions about goal setting or questions about sports psychology, performance psychology, or anything at all, general musings about sports psychology, please do pop them in the comments down below, and we'll talk to you soon.